we're going to check the soundproofness of my studio doors.
So does this sound familiar to you in any way? You want to focus on composing, recording or mixing your music, but the outside noise is so distracting that it's really hard to listen to the details? I struggled with this for years until I recently built this studio. What I discovered? One of the most important factors when it comes to soundproofing are your doors and windows. They're usually the weak spots. In this video, I'll take you step by step through installing soundproof doors and windows using the build of my studio as an example. We'll discover whether installing double windows is worth it, and I've got a hack for those of you who rent and can't make structural changes. Chapter 1. Exterior door and window. We'll start by taking a look at how it all began. Construction Leo, take it away.
We have 3 windows, or I would say 2 windows. One over here, and 1 door. The problem with these windows is they are quite old, so we don't have a lot of soundproofing. Once the acquisition was here, he measured about 76 decibel coming into this room.
After getting the plans from the acoustician, I was a little overwhelmed. 2 doors to the balcony, 2 windows to the street. Do we really need that much? My dad and I jumped in the car, drove to a company and had an initial meeting. I was a bit nervous. Window installers are high in demand in our area, so will he take on something so specific? Let's find out.
The outer one is actually a 5-ply glass, so we have 2 plies glued to each other, then we have air, 1 ply, air, and then also 2 ply.
It was important that the inner door must not have the same glass thickness as the outer one, because if both windows vibrated at the same frequency, it could create a resonating body. So the 2 glasses needed to be different. After some forth and back, the window manufacturer finally decided to do it. He came over, took the measurements, and we discussed how to build the frames for the second window and door. But wait, what about the third window? In acoustics, there's a rule. Speakers should face the long side of the room. That left us with 2 possible setups. This one here and one over here. Unfortunately, I had to rule out this option because the inward opening doors wouldn't leave enough space for my desk. But now we face up a problem.
The room is quite symmetrical, but the window next to this listening position is on the worst spot.
When setting up your studio or home studio, one of the most important factors to get the ideal acoustic is the so-called early reflection zone. These are the first surfaces where sound waves from your speakers bounce and then hit your ears. Wanna try finding your own early reflection zones? Define your listening position, ideally 37%. Place your speakers, ideally a triangle with all equal sides. And now place a mirror at the left side of your wall, roughly between your listening position and the speaker position. Sit down and check if you're able to spot the speaker through the mirror. If you are, reflection zone found. If you aren't, move the mirror until you have found it. Mark your reflection zone. Now repeat the same thing for the right side and the ceiling. Why is it so important to know this? Simple. These spots are by far the most crucial when it comes to improving the acoustics in your room. If you don't do anything else, at least focus on these 3 areas.
The thing about this window actually is it takes all the early reflections coming from my speakers, which will be located here and there.
No way around it, the window had to go. The window installers came by, removed the old windows. Meanwhile, we started closing the unwanted windows.
Period.
As we know, weight makes insulation, but apparently the window installer doesn't care. They were jokingly cursing the weight of the door. It's not every day they have to carry a 120 kilo door up to the 2nd floor, but they did a great job.
We have a normal window here, and then we have this 5-ply one over there. And this will take us a lot of sound coming into the studio.
So the windows were installed, the holes and gaps filled with wood wool and spray foam, and a few weeks later everything was covered with drywall. Painted white and done. Now you might be thinking, this guy is telling me something about renovating and structural changes, but what if I don't own the apartment and I'm not allowed to make any changes like that? Well, in that case, you won't have the same option, but there's still a solution. Soundproof curtains. You have two options. Pre-made. They're probably very effective. However, I received an offer for such a curtain and it was way too expensive for my taste. Which brings us to option 2, DIY. You can make your own curtains using stage molten fabric and then add a standard, inexpensive but stylish fabric in front to improve the look. The rule is simple: more weight, more insulation. Chapter 2, Interior Door. It wasn't as crucial as the outer doors, since there's no traffic to people outside this room. But to make it short, the door definitely needed to be soundproof in some way. I started checking prices for an acoustic door and quickly dismissed the idea. It would completely destroy my budget. But still, I wanted a door that would soundproof. A good friend of mine runs a carpentry shop. I visited him to ask for his advice and luckily got it. He told me to build it myself using a 6-layer panel that he had lying around. He asked me how I was about to do the cutouts and I started to explain.
Stop, Leo. Pay me a little and I'll mill the door for you. You'll save days of work and get a much more professional result.
You know what? I've got so much other stuff to do and want to get it done, so okay, let's do this.
By the way, let me know in the comments if you're interested in my original DIY door and I might create a bonus episode for that. A few weeks later, I got the call to pick up the door. The big surprise was that he had already installed ceiling strips. There were still a few steps to make sure the door was up to the task. The next step is where the true soundproofing of a room is determined. Closing all gaps and holes. If you're not careful with all details and overlook holes or gaps, it doesn't really matter how soundproof, dense or expensive the material was, the sound will leak. That's why it's so important to focus on sealing properly.
For example, when you look down here, everything is sealed with silicone, and if you open it, you can see silicone, silicone, silicone. If there's just one single gap, it can transmit sound and it can kind of destroy the whole purpose of everything else you did. The same thing applies to screws and nails. Be careful with these things.
I used a flexible silicone which blocks sound, but also allows the material to shift slightly, what it usually does. If you pay close attention, you might have noticed something very important is missing. Right, the door handle. Let me tell you, I found something really cool for this. What if I told you there's a door handle that only requires a single hole to be drilled? Just one spot where air could potentially leak through? That's right, it exists. I'm talking about a freezer handle. The main purpose of this handle is to keep warm air out and cold air inside the freezer. Air is sound. Therefore, it's the perfect solution for a studio build. And it gets even better. This one hole, if drilled correctly, is completely filled by the pin that goes through the door. Sure, it might not look as sleek as a regular door handle, but honestly, I think it looks special and a little bit cool.
I built this spacer that you see here because this little thingy was too wide and I couldn't put this holder further back, so I had to add this wood block. Then I also had to cut this frame a little bit, and then I could mount the handle.
Once the handle was installed, there were just 2 steps missing. Paint. The door had to be painted. I used regular white primer and a coat of paint. It wasn't necessary, but to make the door even a little more soundproof, I decided to fill the air gap with a little extra insulation box. door was finished and I was about to take the old one to the recycling center. But wait, is there any way to fix the non-existing soundproofness of this thin door? Why not keep it? Couldn't I double it up like with the exterior door? I went ahead, attached the hinge pins outside, milled the door frame, installed 4 boards in the door frame with slots for sealing rubbers, painted the door, sealed everything with silicone again, installed the door, and when you close the door and the other door is also closed, you really have to push inwards and you really feel that there's air being compressed. So that's something that just shows me that the sealing of the door really is working. Was it all worth it? During the studio build, we also replaced the windows in my apartment just across the way, which gives me a pretty good one-on-one comparison. When I'm in my living room, where we installed standard windows, it's noticeably louder from the outside, and the noise is coming from the windows. Both the special 5-ply glass and the double glazed windows and doors have made a huge difference, reducing outside noise from 70 dB down to under 20. Let's say you have the option to change your windows. Before you go out there and get better windows, consider the soundproofness of your walls. If you have a thin, sound-leaking wall as an exterior wall, getting better windows won't really help much. You're better off starting with building a decoupled wall. If you want to see how I built a room-in-room wall, click here. For now, have an amazing day, thanks for watching, I gotta go cycling, so bye bye.